Hello, Somonai Breathhart again here with Mandark Chapter 3. Mandark by Richard Sharpe Shaver. Published, Chapter 3, published in the Shaver Mystery Magazine, Volume 1, Number 2, 1947. The earth, our Mother Mu, was spinning closer and closer in her inward spiral toward the sun which had captured her. On the surface the great ice sheets were melting, seas were forming, and floods swept across the rocky barren surface, yellow with the clay which had been buried under ice and under vast drifts of liquid air for untold eons. I, Jehovah, Lord ruler of Sabaoth, elder planet afar, turned again to the big penetrate vision screen which showed the surface far above. The last belated migration ships were blasting bright trails of smoke across the sky, leaving billowing brown rings as their pilots shifted the drives to greater and greater acceleration. So maybe this is another name for Ramon Seti. I don't know. Jehovah, Lord ruler of Sabaoth. The last belated migration ships were blasting bright trails of smoke, etc. But I, by some freak of fate, must stay here on this cursed baby planet for untold years, under this deadly sun, and see just what a sun does to life. For it had been so long since my race lived under a sun that the old work of that kind must be redone. I had come to Mu for this express purpose. Okay, so it's not Ramon. He had come to Mu for the express purpose to conduct the experiment. And he's from another planet called Sabaoth. End of editor's note. This cruelty must be done, for it will result in vast good to the billions upon billions of our races in space. And Adam and Eve are but two, and their offspring will be twisted out of human character by the evil magnetic distortion of the sun's evil day. I looked at the intricacies of the great mechanism of the telesolidograph Viso ray, built by a race whose skill was born not overnight, but over millennia of effort by billions of technicians. The powerful magnetic field magnification, product of the science called magic by the technicians of my race, would reveal any little life, any minute plant. It would even enlarge the view of a minute insect till the bug was spread over the whole 20-foot cubical screen in full detail. And it accomplished that through the miles of rock overhead between me and the valley called Eden. It would tell me just what the sun did, detail by detail, to man life, as well as to all the other forms of life we would bring out of the abandoned hydroponic gardens of the caverns and plant in the great valley under the sun. Swiftly I ran the great ray over the valley called Eden above, studying the soil as the water drained away. As I studied, I mused aloud. Eden, once a frozen plain surrounded by mountains of ice, a place used for the landing of space liners, too huge for the cavernways, will soon be beautiful with the treacherous and deadly beauty of the life forms which will fill gradually with the radioactive poisons from the sun. Soon it is to become the home of the father and mother of all sin upon this poor, cursed planet. Well, it is true it is an evil thing to do to two innocent children, but I know no other way to find out all the truth of evil degeneration under aging suns. But I do not like this job. I do not like it at all. And in the garden, still a rocky expanse of bare, wet soil, the plants of the great food gardens of the abandoned cities were set out in rows, each row of a kind, and within a short time the whole of the barren expanse was a carpet of wildly luxuriant and growing verdure. And a year swept by, and fern trees were shooting tall, green spearheads at the sky that was now blue where it had always been black as night. Editor's note. Now, fern trees, according to the fossil records of this planet we live on, Earth, according to the fossil record, fern trees existed before any of the flowering plants, existed even before the conifers. So fern trees were the first trees, the first tall plants. And we go back to the Carboniferous period, so-called Carboniferous period, when fern trees ruled. So this is geological theory. But fossil records don't lie. Now, where was I? And a year swept by and fern trees were shooting tall, green spearheads at the sky that was now blue where it had always been black as night. And the two children, Adam and Eve, were released from the incubators where I had grown them from the seed left us by the departing Atlans. And they were the seed of the best woman of that city and of myself, for it was my own son I condemned to this experiment. And the woman had consented and gone her way. And Adam and Eve were turned out of the cave of the treasures into the Garden of Eden. But the way into the cavern was left open, for the nights were still cold from the winds that had not yet died down, from the first stormy breath of air, from the liquid air and air ice which had covered the planet Mu. And I watched the two children playing in the garden, which was a seeming paradise of lovely plants that all bore fruit, and of bright and harmless insects. Editor's note. So from fern trees, we've now moved to a paradise where we have plants with flowers and fruit. So we've done a jump of millions of years. Millions of years here. We've jumped forward millions of years. The two children playing in the garden. Millions of years after the initiation of the garden. Now, how old were Adam and Eve at this point in time? How long had they been living in the garden, in Eden? Well, a little bit hard to say from this account. And I could not help but feel sad, for I knew the terrible jungle of lust and sudden death and struggle for food, which must in time be the end product of all my work. But it must come to pass. So it would seem that for millions of years Adam and Eve did not taste of death. Their children did not taste of death. Man on this world did not taste of death for millions of years. So it would seem all through the Carboniferous era, and the eras in geological theory after that. For millions of years there was growth. The decay had not yet begun. But it must come to pass. And I guided the children and taught them to eat the fruit of the plants, and to pick the figs from the trees. And I watched over them in every way that would not influence their character, which must be born entirely from the natural influences of the combined magnetic fields of the earth and the sun above, which must of necessity be a natural self-born character in every way, to prove our theories as to character correct. For all we knew that evil nature in man was due to disintegrant energy from sun, which the electric thinking machine, the human brain, in some cases inducts more strongly than in others, due to an attunement in the magnetic fields of the cells, which in some resists these detrimental influences, and in others fails to so resist, and becomes instead an instrument for destruction in life. A life of fire, a life that accomplishes only what a fire would accomplish. But what we did not have was the details of this subjection to destructive flows of energy. And this mass of detail was what we expected to get from subjecting Adam and Eve to the new conditions of life under the sun that had captured the planet Mu. But our job was vastly important. We faced the risks and we took our precautions against the infiltration of the inductive radioactivity from the sun, and we would win or lose our immortal lives. Editor's note. Concerning the geological records. It's a little bit confusing, isn't it? The fossil record shows fern trees, cycads, that sort of thing, in the primeval forests of this planet. Then we've got the softwoods, the conifers, and then we've got the flowering plants. But it would seem perhaps that initially, since the Garden of Eden was seeded by plants from the hydroponic gardens of the caverns, that initially there must have been edible plants planted. So flowering plants, fruiting plants must have been planted in the original Eden. Very interesting, this. Perhaps life was initiated in most of the planet quite spontaneously through the sunshine. And indeed, I've been reading about this in a book by one Nikolai Levashov. Where he talks about how life can be begun from inorganic to organic, and then organic to replicating organic. The production of chlorophyll and the process of photosynthesis. So maybe that actually did happen. But here in the Garden of Eden, only in the Garden of Eden, was the gardens of the caverns planted. Anyway, something to think about. Trying to piece it all together here. Remember, this is not a science fantasy story. This is a reality story, and it has to make sense with what we actually know today. End note. Our job was vastly important. We faced the risks and we took our precautions against this infiltration of the inductive radioactivity from the sun, and we would win or lose our immortal lives. Outside came a vast roar. Many ships filled the sky and dwindled into the small of distance. I knew it was the migration of the Atlans and the Titans from Mother Mu. But inside it was quiet, for we were in a cavern miles deep in the earth and underlying the valley called Eden. For ages this valley had been a frozen nothing. Now the sun had come into the life of Mu, and Eden had been chosen as the garden where experiments in observation of sun rays' effects upon life would take place. A very big, horned being, not entirely human in shape, was talking to me. Master, it seems a cruel fate for any life to be subjected to this evil sunlight till death. Is it wholly necessary? Azrael, it is vitally necessary. We must have complete data on the effects of radioactive sun particles absorbed by the body under these aging suns. For this reason, all the data of our supposedly infallible scientific records is ages old. The subject has been neglected in the ages since we learned to live immortally in the shells of the planets of the dark spaces. The data which remains to us from the study of the cause of age is medically unreliable. We do not know if the men who made the records and observations of the experiments were honest and sincere scientists or not. Besides, this sun is made up of many elements not found in the suns under which the former work was done. The truth is, our immortal race is damned ignorant of its worst enemy, age. That is a situation that cannot go uncorrected for want of a little effort or even cruelty. The great horned being, who seemed to be my assistant in some mighty difficult job we had to do, went on talking. I understand, O my Lord, but they are sweet children, are Adam and Eve. It is hard to believe, to realize that so soon Adam and Eve must become hideous from old age, and that we must let the terrible poison from the sun devour their young lives. We know well what measures to take against the evil. I shook my head. The health of millions of far superior beings depends on the ruthless care with which we do our work, Azrael. A god can be too sentimental. For instance, many of the children of Adam and Eve will become evil, cruel, and untrustworthy. We know it, and must let it happen while we take notes, endless spools of record wire of their thoughts, for all our police and medical men must know all the little signs of evil degeneracy in the young. Interim. And time passed on the face of the earth, and the sun turned and burned, and the earth turned and swung in its orbit about the sun. And the sons of Adam and Eve multiplied, as told in the Bible. And I dreamed on within the mighty dream mech of the gods, with my faithful little Nydia tending, and she put records in of the time that passed, put her own thought into the receptor screen of the mechanism, and the tales of her people had told her of this time. And the latter gods rose and spread through all the caverns, and were mighty, but not wise as were the elder gods of the days of cold upon earth's face. And because of their ignorance and their vice and their practices, they decayed and became as devils within the earth. And the legend of hell and its devils was born of their custom of capturing and torturing men in their homes deep in the earth. And this was a terrible and an ignorant time upon earth. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. I awoke, and Nydia fed me, and said, You must learn all quickly, for I do not know how long we may be able to stay here. The devil rays may drive us away or kill us, so back into the dream mech you go. Time passed, a great deal of time, 20,000 years in all. Their time measurement was very different from our own, and there is no way to tell you how long it was from the records. So 20,000 years their time, whatever their time is. How many years of Earth time it was, we do not know. There are records, as you may have gathered from other writings, about this forbidden and hidden base of our past. Editor's note, see the other Richard Shaver stories, in Amazing Stories in particular. Still available today in new publications of the old Shaver mysteries. End editor's note. There are records, as you may have gathered from other writings, about this forbidden and hidden base of our past. Vast and complete records in the hidden cavern cities that still exist, but they are not easy to read, being records of thought for the most part, a thought full of alien and multiform symbolism too great conceptually for our poor brains to grasp. In this chamber which the two last high gods of all earth had prepared, where for so long had been only silence, the tick-tock of a timing mechanism had begun. The pre-timer had functioned. For an age, the pre-timer had weakened, for it was a device whose operation was based on the slow deterioration of a soft metal, as a fuse is based on the weakness of the fuse wire. Now, at last, it had parted, and the final timer had begun its work. At the same time, the soft glow of an emerald light filled the polished rock walls of the chamber. Otherwise, there was still the silence of the sealed rock room, except for an occasional bubbling from the metal tubes leading to an egg-shaped container of a man's size at the side of the room. On a low couch at the wall, under the emerald light, lay the nude, bronzed figure of a giant woman. Time passed. The electric clock ticked. The bubbling sound went on at intervals in the hidden place. The giant woman's skin was soft and her arms spread as though to receive an infinite. A god's skin was never exposed to the rays of the sun, but only to the rays of their own making. Her head was very large, her hair soft and lustrous as living hair is soft and lustrous. She did not move. A year passed and nothing moved in the soft green light of that mysterious cradle of mighty life. There was only the tick-tock, the green light, the white hangings, and the golden bronze beauty of the woman against the white. Then the timing mechanism went off with a loud crack like a circuit breaker. The door on the egg-shaped container swung open. Cradled within was a baby, a very big and very much alive baby, the nutrient fluids in which he had been immersed draining off him. He let out the usual cry of a newborn child and began to breathe the air of the chamber. He was the son of a strong and ancient race. He was their seed, left in the time capsule as a gift to all the people of Mother Earth, in return for their subjection to the terrible and certain death of the Son that had been ordained to the children of Adam and Eve by the necessity for study of the effects of the sun upon animals, including the human animal. There are several races of gods, many mixed races, and not all are of human form. This son of the ancient rulers of space was now the only hope of Earth for a fair future. Born with the instincts and abilities of an animal far superior to ordinary man, he was able to care for himself even better than the normal wild animal is today. Strangely, though the skin of his ancestors had been a bronze white, the skin of the baby god was black as pitch. For the wisdom of the elders who had put his seed within the incubator had added a certain material to the nutrient which caused black pigmentation. Their purpose was to give him a better chance to resist the detrimental rays of the sun. It is startling to realize that nature has done the same thing for the black man of Africa that was consciously done for the Messiah. This baby was the only living God on earth. He crawled about the chamber and soon found the still form of the mimic mother on the low couch. From her artificial breasts he drew nourishment, replenished from the hidden containers behind the mechanical figure. Time passed. Except for the low tick of the timer and the bubble of the nutrients in the hidden wall tanks, there was no sound. The baby crawled endlessly about the great, lonesome, prisoning and sealed room, finding solace only in the big, soft breasts of the artificial mother. Another year passed. Then the timer made another loud sound. Words came from a wall aperture. They were simple words, repeated over and over. On the wall screen, moving and delightful pictures illustrated the words' meaning. The baby clapped his hands and watched the pictures, and as the pictures unrolled daily, he learned to talk. And as time went on and the automatic mechanic disc changed the records to more advanced themes, his education really began. He learned why he was alone, and that he was the only living son of a mighty race on earth. That they had been forced to leave earth to flee the burning, aging sun, but could not bear not to give the people of old Mother Moo some chance for a future. He was that something, their gift to the future. He was the true Messiah. These books and records, these maps of their city caverns, their machinery, was all left him to serve his purpose. To build again from the degenerate seed of Adam and Eve, destroyed in character and in health by the long centuries under the sun. Their God-inherited intelligence reduced by the fearful Sunday through the years to the level of a stupid animal, reduced by the evil magnetic from their original greatness. To build again an immortal race, such as had peopled the earth before the sun had appeared, before they had succumbed to the evil degeneration force of the mighty burning atomic disintegrants overhead. Before they had succumbed to the evil, before their planet home had been captured by the great weight of the sun, life had been love and happiness. Now, after all this time, if it was possible to build such a life again, even under the sun, that was his life job. He must succeed, the records repeated. The great experiment of the God called Jehovah had been allowed to run its course, as they needed the observation of the full effects of a sun from clean, uninfected origin to final stages upon a race of men. I will repeat that sentence. Editor's note here. The great experiment of the God called Jehovah had been allowed to run its course, as they needed the observation of the full effects of a sun from clean, uninfected origin to final stages upon a race of men. So there we have it. When the Great Migration from Mu first happened, when the first Great Migration happened, as Mu was being captured in orbit to Sol, Sol at that point in time was clean and uninfected. End note. As they needed the observation of the full effects of a sun from clean, uninfected origin to final stages upon a race of men. But their compassion had placed him here as an agent of their pity to bring healing methods and the science of growth toward greatness again to man. Most of the gods left Earth at the same time, though a few did remain here and there on Earth, for they were such ill-natured individuals from the already noticeable infection of day that none of the captains of the great migration ships would take them aboard. Editor's note. Maybe they were absolutely super ultra sensitive to any solar radiation, but as mentioned earlier, it was mainly the psychological effect rather than the physical effect, which was the problem. End note. Two, they probably came long after. The junk dealers and scum of that tremendous civilization to loot the deserted caverns of what valuables they might find. These leftover Deviles, or devil gods, as man later called them, for their bodies were vile with the day charge from the sun. How vile were they, really? Day is from the ancient original language, is a shorthand symbol for disintegrant energy, DE. Or degradation, energetic degradation. These devil gods were the reason for the flight of the gods, aside from the age the sun brought with it. For even a god could become a devil if the sun infection took his natural goodwill and left the destruction compulsion of the disintegrant magnetic forces of the sun. And the years passed in that green-lit chamber deep in the rock of Mother Earth, and daily the young god studied what had been written by the man god who had left his seed as an offering to the great soul of Mother Earth and to her people. And if the God had not known that Mother Earth was a life herself, had a kind of existence as a being in her own right, it would not have been true that the young son of the gods had been alive. For the ages of the gods thought of all things as living things, though living in different ways, and that they loved Mother Earth, for they had always had ways of knowing her that have since been lost. At last the young god was grown to a great size, and the voice from the wall spoke, saying, "Go forth and conquer the people who swarm over earth, and make these people well again." And the young god went up out of the chamber, for the door was now open, where had been no door before. In the great cavern city of the old race, his feet carried him among the endless empty mansions, marvelling at the work of his fathers, at the beauty that had been theirs. But he had expected all this, for the cities were pictured in his books and in his mental records. But he had not expected this brooding emptiness, this time's death of time that hovered over all that wondrous handiwork. His heart sank, for there was no life anywhere. And he turned on a great dynamo of the kind that ran by a gravity focus and needed no fuel. He directed the current through the C-ray mech and looked everywhere about for people, but there were none that he could call men. Some small monkey-like things ran furtively from his bright vision ray beam and concealed themselves within a ray-opaque room. But he could not think that these evil-smelling things were men. At last he directed the great penetrative ray up through the miles of rock above him into the sunlight of that valley that had once been Eden. Now a great city lay in that valley, and the name of that city was Jerusalem, and the valley had risen to a plateau. The voices and thoughts of the men of the city brought the knowledge of what men had become. Our editor's note here. And the valley had risen to a plateau. So we're talking about geological time span here. It used to be a valley. So we're talking about the valley that the Dead Sea is in, that the River Jordan is in, saying that it used to be a valley, but now it has become a plateau. So we're talking a long time here. We're talking geological history, right? We're talking millions of years. End note. The voices and thoughts of the men of the city brought the knowledge of what men had become to him, and he was sad, for men are not gods, and the young god was surpassing lonesomeness for his own kind. But there was good in them, and he could try. There is no way to put 2 quarts of fluid in a thimble, and the young god found it impossible to tell the men of the surface anything. These people fell down and worshipped when he showed his image over the projector solidograph communicator, telepic mech. But they could not understand even his thoughts when he caused the image beam to augment his thoughts near the men of the surface. They heard the great and mighty thought, yes, and knew only that a god stood before them, and they worshipped, but he found no way to use them for an intelligent thing. 2. They had great fear of his seemingly solid projection, for their traditions and their own experience had taught them to fear all such things as the work of devils or of evil gods, and they wanted nothing but to get far away from it. And young Yahweh could not understand this, for he did not know yet what had been happening during the thousands and thousands of years while he had slept. He had been taught everything up to the point of the preparation of the birth chamber. But then the chamber had been closed against all entries, and no one had corrected the records or brought them up to date for the Messiah. He did not know what had gone on, nor of the eons of time since his home had been built for the long embryo sleep. With a great sadness in him, the young God decided that he would have to raise his first followers from little children with the ancient penetrative beneficial rays to make them wise and strong and able to understand him. So it was that not only the Virgin Mary, but other women as well were told that they bore within them the seed of greatness. For the beneficial rays penetrating the rock beamed upon the unborn children within them and made them grow in a way that men had not grown since the exodus of the gods. Mother Mary saw the radiant image of the beautiful young God near her in the night, and knew not what had been done, but only that a God had shown his love for her. The young God had turned to Joseph and said, "Joseph, son of David, fear not to take Mary your wife unto you, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. She shall bring forth a mighty son, and you shall call him Jesus." Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the young God of the deep caverns set over Bethlehem a great light like a star, so that man should know that the word of the ancient gods was fulfilled, and that the Son of God was born again. For he knew that men could not understand him, but that they would understand Jesus, whom he planned to raise among them as the answer to the great promise left them of old. That he was sure. As the young Messiah, the only living God on earth, swept his great old sea ray around about in the night, as he watched over Jesus and set the star flaming above the stable cave where Jesus lay, he saw in the adjacent caverns a thing he had not expected to see. His teachings had not mentioned them as he saw them now. It was true he had been warned that some evil forms of life were to be expected, but the teachings had not prepared him for the sight of devils, and there were devils above him in the old cavern city, and they knew that he was there below them, and were preparing to kill him with one of the ancient weapons. Small and man-like things they were, but totally different from the men he had watched on the surface, for all their lives and many generations of their ancestors had been spent wholly in the caverns, which were for the most part dark now. For the ancient cavern cities were not originally barren places of no light and no green leaves. There was instead fresh air and beauty, much as we think of as raised only in sunlight. They were, instead of dark cavern holes, like great endless conservatories, abloom with an infinite variety of fecund gigantic plants, and above them burned tubes, alight with designed actinic rays, meant to promote growth without detrimental rays of any kind. A much more beautiful plant growth than is possible under the natural, partly destructive rays of the sun. Much more beautiful than surface forests were the underworld forests of the gods' planting. But after all the thousands of years that had gone by, while his seed lay sleeping in the frozen, sleepy waiting that his fathers had put upon him, the caverns were not healthy places to live any more. The great beneficial rays, which had made the caverns green with plant life, and had made the laughing people's feet light with immortal life, and their faces flushed with the health that is immortal, had all gone out, or been put out by ignorance of those who now lived in the caverns. Portions of the caverns about him he refitted with new lights, and the ancient groves had bloomed again in all their immortal beauty under the hand of the young god, so that around him the ancient plant life had again become part of his life. So it was that the wisdom of the young god had made him able to fill the near caverns with the infinite beauty of the plant life of the original caverns. He had replaced the beneficial rays with new parts from the storehouses, the soil with preserved seeds, but most of the other endless warrens of ancient borings were lifeless except for the furtive man-like things which the young god had not bothered to notice overmuch. But these devils, which the Messiah now saw, were a sickish white from their life underground, without the great old actinic ray lamps which had gone out, and sometimes their skin was mottled with brown lumps, which were some strange fungus which grew in their skin here underground. Some of them were misshapen in various parts by the effect of using growth-accelerating rays upon some parts without subjecting the rest of the body to the flows. Editor's note: in the book Etidorfa, which is about the journey of a man through the underworld, he meets and interacts with a group of people in a cavern who all have giant hands, or one giant hand. And there's a picture of this which you can now look at. End note. Some of them were misshapen in various parts by the effect of using growth-accelerating rays upon some parts without subjecting the rest of the body to the flows. Some of them had spent the greater part of their lives within certain machines here underground, machines which were not understood by them, but which were infinitely pleasant to stay inside, and not coming out of such pleasure machines for anything but food, they were spindly of leg and arm, and could hardly walk. But the horror, who does that remind you of? Greys? You know, classical spindly-legged, spindly-armed greys with big heads? Maybe. All right. But, end of note. But the horrors of their peculiar appearance was not the real horror about them. Reading their minds, the young Messiah was astounded. for in all the wisdom he had drunk in at the knees of his artificial mother, the thing he faced now across the screens of the ancient ray weapons was not mentioned. For its thought was not thought. Pure, detrimental energy plus reflection thought. That is, they perceived by reflection only. Their surroundings added to their awareness only details. Their thought was always that thought which they read in others. It was only detrimental electric. The brain of a man is a battery. Among other things, that the Messiah knew, but he had not known that it could be charged with full detrimental energy without death resulting. But here was proof of this. Things like men whose brain batteries were charged to the full with detrimental electric, and all their thought was the result of this detrimental and not the result of natural, beneficial, integrative flows from the brain cell electric at all. How could this thing be? These were devils. His tardy memory came to life, waking from its astonishment at the first contact with fully detrimental thought. These are described as the end product of an age, many generations of degeneration in a field of gradually increasing detrimental electric day energy content. As he watched their life, he deduced just how they came to be and how they came to be able to live in spite of the detrimental electric which surcharged their bodies. Electric eels live, though the electric they give off in such quantities is detrimental to life. Yeah, very strange. Electric eels. They lived within the antique beneficial rays, keeping them turned on all the time, but they did not know the difference between a useful ray instrument and a worn-out one which gave off continuously increasing amounts of detrimental alloyed with the beneficial current. Hence they kept the pleasant-feeling beneficial rays going long after, centuries after, they would normally have been replaced with new metal. This mental result of completely devilish thought was due then to the long use of worn-out beneficial and pleasure rays. Centuries of breeding and living in the detrimental field thus created had evolved a creature whose life was motivated wholly by the pervading destructive rays in which they lived. Footnote 10. These devils no sooner saw the mighty figure of the black son of the gods than they began an attack upon him. It was an attack they soon wished they had withheld. They sent over his watching ray a charge of lightning which would have killed a lesser man, but he grounded the terrific charge before it reached him with a shorter ray, which is always fitted into ray instrument in the same way a fire extinguisher is hung upon a modern electric motor or nearby. This shorter ray is a black conductive ray which acts as a fully conductive flow, grounding any ray energy it touches. There is a lot more to understand of the ancient mechanism's deterioration producing the devils, but it takes a while to explain. They lived in a constant bath of the ancient pleasure rays by habit, their great potency making life a constant ecstasy, and they had so lived for endless centuries. The gradually deteriorating mechanisms had induced greater and greater amounts of disintegrant electric flows from the sun's terrible fields of magnetic. As their bodies became accustomed to these flows, the phenomena of degeneration became accelerated in them. This functioned more greatly in the head than other parts of the body, because they spent many hours a day peering over the old penetrative rays at surface people and at each other. The disintegrants centered thus about the head, and the rest of the body made up for the energy losses by its production of natural integrative energy flows. Hence, the devils lived on, but the brain, so used to detrimental rays and energy flows that it could not generate sufficient thought energy to think with, at last succumbed and let the day flows dominate the thought processes instead of its own product, the natural flows of thought energy. This synthetic detrimental thought flow became habitual, then hereditary with the Deros. They could not think without an old ray to peer into. The resulting flows of energy activated their defunct brain, while the conveyed thought from the person in the view screen gave them their reflected thought, to which they reacted detrimentally without adding anything to the thought but the detrimental impulse. Thus only a reflected pseudo-thought was left them in place of normal created thought. No matter what the thought, it always finished within their heads in a detrimental conclusion or a totally innocuous conclusion. Kill or nothing. Young Yahweh waited no more to study these curious evil creatures, but wiped them out with flashing bolts of deadly energy. But he was not through with the devils of the caverns. For even as those died who were before him, others in the far reaches of vision took up the attack upon him, and the rock about him was a flashing, whirling pattern of lancing, darting arrows of penetrative ray from many directions. He had precipitated an attack by hundreds by a tribe of the Dero. Throwing up a heavy fan of the black shorter ray before him, he swiftly retreated down to the depths that had bore him. He knew that this deep chamber was shielded by dense and impenetrable materials, that no ray could reach him there. Then, too, there were weapons more familiar to him, and periscopic sight by which he could watch and kill without being exposed. The young god took several days now to study these cavern dwellers, for he was now understanding that they were the greatest obstacle before his plans for men. They had the antique weapons, and generations of them had passed down the methods of which they had learned. Reading their thoughts and taking record on the multi-recorder of every head in range of his ray, he soon had a complete cross-section of their life upon his spools. Taking the spools of wire from the recording mech, he realised that this deep crypt below the ancient city would always be his retreat in time of need, his only real home. There he spent his time studying the records of the thought of the devil people. That's the end of chapter 4.